Anne Hughes, Temecula, August 7th, 1999, Tape 2.
So, but when you are in love, I must say this, when you are in love with the divine, not falling in love, but when love is filling your heart, you don't care a hoot about your body. You don't care a hoot about somebody else's body. You don't care a hoot about where you are. It is immaterial. Listen to the word, dear hearts, immaterial. And what I mean by that, you know that you are simply spirit, simply in matter. You are in a consciousness called form. There is nothing else for you, and you have no interest in somebody else, and you are not interested in the outpicturing, and yet the compassion within your beingness understands that you are looking at the beloved, whether they are aware of it or not. There is no denial of you, of the beloved. There is nothing and no veil that comes in between you and the beloved. Everything will be given to you. Some of you, as we are moving into these two worlds, because you are feeling that you are in both worlds at the moment, and we honor that. This is what we call the changeover. So you have one foot in one world, as we say, one in another, and some of you feel very, at times, sticky in what we call the third dimensional world. Now, we are simply saying that some of you who have chosen to surrender in such a way whereby you know that you cannot, that there is a complete, or the spirit level is steering you through the ascended host in particular ways, others will come to play their part in their service to the divine. What we are saying here with reference to money, in the changeover, or what we call the moving through from one, we may say, state space to another state space in the human consciousness, of the human understanding about material consciousness, or the physical levels. We are saying that there will be souls, and we know this, who will release their money, who will release, who are high souls who have come in to play their parts, who will release what we call their gifts that have been presented to them, because nothing belongs to us. I am going to say to you, masters, stop hoarding. If you believe in the divine, then you will allow the divine. It is not for you to hoard for your old age. It is not for you to hoard in your fear. Now, the divine will always present everything to you. Your own wisdom will come through. This is what we are saying. But there will be souls that will play their parts in due course, and we feel very confident this will take place. Other than that, they will have it taken away from them, dear hearts. Spirit knows exactly its soul levels and what has it, each soul facet has chosen to present. And, of course, again, there is no judgment here. There can never be. And it's not for us to decide who has it and who doesn't. But I am aware there are some souls on this planet who, with such love unconditionally, are presenting whatever they have, and all of you in your own way, not just through the money, but through your very giving and your very being of yourself, will give all that you have. Give all that you have, for you are all that you are. It's that simple, dear ones. It is so important I say this to you. Let go of the outpicturing of how you perceive it. It is so important. So, little ones, how may I say to you of the blessedness I feel as I experience you? You have become aware of me as a form consciousness here. And at times, probably, you have felt challenged through this form consciousness. But you have known within your hearts those dear ones who know this consciousness, known as Anne Francis, through the Christ consciousness that has come through, that has only ever come through this being, in her total consecration and continued consecration, that you are loved, that you have always been loved. There has never been a time that you have not been loved. And in the consciousness, we may say, of the Christ known as Francis, for you are all Francis. You have, again, as I said, I hope it doesn't sound incestuous, but you all have Francis within you, as we will say. All of you have the Christ has many names. And look at you, 6 billion names, 6 billion facets of your beingness here, and so many here. But what I am simply saying to you, in the consciousness as Francis, in the consciousness through the Christ speaking through Francis, I am with you beyond the end of time, dear hearts, beyond. There has not been a time that I have not been with you and loved you in all that you are, beloved of my heart. Oh, sweet flowers, the perfume that exudes from you is breathtaking. It is so beautiful. I love you, my little brothers and sisters. I love you so much. It is impossible for me to express the love that I feel, that I am in all of you. For you are my love. For there is only one love. There is only one heart, one journeyer of one voice. The voice is called I Am That, at last incarnate here. Welcome. Welcome through these eyes, beloved. Welcome through the trees as they speak and they talk to us. Welcome in all that you are. Let us bring the rest of the diamond home, beloved. No more, no less in who you are. You are unique. You are magnificent. You are bejeweled. You are the divine I Am That. You are the Father. You are the Son. And you are the sweet Mother. My heart's love to you. I am. Yes, dear heart, I will accommodate that. What I was going to say to you was that my colleague, who is here and who has made it very possible for this form's service to take place, or this soul service to take place, always informs me that perhaps I should pave the way open for questions if they are so desired. But you see, I do understand that in the consciousness that we have shared here, how can one speak so much other than to feel? Yes, I have been the, we may say, mouthbox. Somebody made a comment to me, and it's lovely, and I've always remembered it, about the fact that, would I speak more? I said, dear heart, I could speak to you for weeks, and it would never stop. For you see, it is the consciousness through this form. And I probably would bore you to death as well. And what a way we could transcend. Wouldn't that be wonderful? But what I am saying to you here is that in the Christ beingness here, through the great Buddha, and the Buddhi levels and the Krishnic levels, and again they are just words that we give in order to accommodate the fact that you are the spirit levels experiencing a soul in what we call the physical creation levels. We have the full Trinity here that you are experiencing in your beingness here. But very often you will feel those energies so powerfully, and I have been working, and it is my honor to say something to you, that through the Christ being, through the office of the Christ, as we will say, for it is not a religious concept, no. Again, we understand and we accept our dear brothers that may choose, we may say, to adore the Christ through an historical figure, we may say. And that is honored and that is loved, and there is no judgment and there is no problem there. All is well, all is well. We know every soul where they are, and we understand the outpicturing of the human, we may say, dramas, and of course perhaps some of the distortions, but there is no judgment and there never will be. Everybody is the beloved child of the Father itself, of the greater all that is. But what I was saying to you is that we have been working with your seventh seal. It is the seventh chakra in order to assist you to move into the eighth chakra. Now, over your heads. Now, please understand as I am working here. Forget the form yet again. Forget. The form has gone through certain transfigurations where it knows and it can see all the energies through not just the ascended host, but in levels of consciousness that cannot be linearized through this concept, through the form. There are triangles over each and every one of your heads at this moment of time. What this basically means is that you are moving now, and there is a transitional process taking place within each and every one of you, where you are moving into the 8th, 9th, and 10th. Now, when we say that, don't buy into what we call the outer picturing as I'm giving it to you. These are octaves that you are taking and being taken through. Some of you may feel energies in your bodies. You may even pick up this form consciousness during your sleep. Do not be concerned. I hope that I am not intruding in your rooms. But this takes place very often, and people, I say this because of the feedback that we get constantly, but it is not to be prurient and to find out where you are or who you are sleeping with or what is going on, dear heart. No. This is not what this is about. We are simply working with you as souls, and of course because you are used to this consciousness as well here, through Anne Francis, and you will feel more comfortable in perhaps the visualization. Some of you may take great exception, but I hope that we can overcome that one, dear heart. So just feel the heart's love that is working with you. So it is just to say to you that some of you may go through, and you may experience even some anger. You may even, it does not matter. All it is energy being released within you. It is form consciousness, as we say. It is the matrix of the paradigm of the mother being released within you. Now, dear hearts, do you wish me to continue perhaps with, or would some of you like to leave or ask some questions, dear hearts? To continue. All right, beloved. Thank you, dear heart. So I take that as acceptable then, that this form is accepted in the work that is taking place here. All right, let me explain to you. It is very important now we talk about the mother. The mother, as you know, is a compendium of grids. She is a morphogenic field of consciousness. She has billions and billions of what we call capillaries. She has tectonic plates. She is an entity, bear in mind, she's outpictured as creator in creation. So she's creator in her creation. It's creation, we will say. Let's use the word it's. So what we are saying here to you is that she is applicable, and she is, as you heard me say, germane to what we call solar consciousness. She has, and we have in our solar consciousness inseeding as the light being, as the Adam Kadmon, or what we call as part of the experience for the Adam Kadmon, which is the similitude and image of the creator levels, which is the light being, which what we call seeds all creations, and will finally what we call oversee all creations for the father levels, as we say. We are it. What is happening is that she is a matrix. Now, and she works on what we call grids of time. They are magnetic fields or electromagnetic fields that are around her body consciousness. They hold you, each seed and spark from the divine light levels that step down and engender through the soul consciousness as the journeyer, and basically as interface between spirit and matter. Now, matter is, again, we may say, on one level, inert creations, except what we call she's sentient creation. She has all her fields and all her, what we call her gardens and her kingdoms, her elementals, from the elemental kingdoms to what we call the mineral kingdoms, the plant kingdoms, the animal kingdoms. And we have engendered in the soul, what we call consciousness, as the facet known as humankind. Now, you've heard me say, and you've understood what I've been referring to about nature man. Because on one level we have come into nature, but the idea was not to be so engrossed that we could not wake up within nature and then transfigure nature. So does that make sense in what I'm saying right now? Good. And so it was not to be offensive about what we call the lower chakras. The lower chakras are vital for the form consciousness, but at a certain stage we have to let go and transcend and bring those chakras up to the next stage of consciousness. So it is what we call from the heart chakra up is where many are now transcending. And we line up what we call, and we have firmed up the base, and basically Mother is saying, I've had enough now, I want to birth my child. The consciousness of the sun or the light, when we say the sun, the S-U-N, or we say the child consciousness, which is what we are, as the interface, as the journeyer, the soul, has done enough now, and it requires that awakening. So what we're saying to you is that she very, very clearly now is she stirring. She is very clearly, she is starting to change and to wind down her magnetic grids. You heard me say that. So her time buffers are going. Now this is being also brought through, and we may say this very, very clearly and very clearly and in a pristine consciousness through some of our brothers who are very conscious spiritually as well. I won't give the names, but they are bringing through very, very clear understandings of what the mother, because it has been written in our codings. The codings are being fired, and they have been fired for sometimes from the 1930s onwards, was when they started to fire the codings for the mothers to start awakening. Now, Jeshua, when he came in, they did a test, we may say. Now, this also has been an experience for mother which has been impossible to explain, because she has also been we may use the expression, a biochemical testing zone for some of the creation levels in the similitude and image for Creator. So what we mean by that is there is not just the Adamic principle here. There are many other, what we call consciousness beings that have presented form that appear to be the Adamic principle, and because they too are going through experiences, and so they have been brought here to undertake further learnings, further growth, and very often when other sun systems were in transfiguration, they were not ready to go through. So of course we may say that, we can simply say they were sifted into a young planet, because this has been a young experience, and I'm giving it this way so as to accommodate the understandings of what is going on here. So what has happened is, that is why we have billions that will not wake up, because there is a greater identification with form consciousness in their consciousness, and yet they are still what we call, they have the opportunity to what we call taken through in the mother's, if there chooses to be, the mother chooses to go through what we call electromagnetic null zone. The potential is very high for this to take place, and that is where our scientists, and not just our spiritual scientists, but many of our scientists have been aware of very interesting, what we call astrophysical factors taking place with increases of solar flares at certain times. We have as many of you have probably felt the energy swirling on this planet in the last few days. Don't forget, and we've had periods of it. And particularly now, as we're coming into what we call the solar eclipse. You had the lunar eclipse, I think, on the 28th of July. I think it was then. So, of course, what is happening here? This is what we call the energies, the two highest form consciousness for us in a solar consciousness outpictured of the mother, or what we call, again, mother-father energy outpictured through the moon, which is the emotional energy, and the sun, which is the strong, what we call, energies coming in that, again, always what we call assist the mother, and the mother has presented very powerfully for us in our emotions, and it's to be honored. In the outpicturing even. So we have many what we call celestial bodies of ourselves. Would you believe that every time we look at stars, we're looking at ourselves? That is, we are from all those creations, they are meta-creations that we are part of. So we are the fabric of our suns, our moons, our nebulas, our blue stars, our so many things are taking place. Now, in we may say astrophysical terminology, we are moving, and there is a potential that we are moving through, we call the electromagnetic null zones at a particular stage. Our scientists are becoming aware of it. They were also in what we call consciousness, informed by some of, we may say, of the overseeing hierarchies for the planetary consciousness through the ascended brotherhoods. They were given indication. Whether they will admit it or not, it doesn't matter, because that is only what we call human dramas of denial going on, and all is well. Because this has been a control factor on this earthly planet to stop, we may even say, the divine souls waking up and realizing that they are not slaves to their human flesh. Does that make sense in what I'm saying to you? Because this is what has gone on. But because, and this must be admitted, because this was a free will zone, this was an incredible experiment that took off. It was an incredible experiment. And so in the great love that as innocent beings coming in here from pure divinity, stepping down into the matrix of the mother, there was not just the animal kingdoms to contend with in what we call the nature fields, in what we call inert consciousness, group consciousness, collective consciousness, as we will say, and sentient consciousness. We also agreed to allow, we may say, souling from other levels of consciousness. Now, the word consciousness, it is so difficult to really explain this, but consciousness are grids of creator's beingness, you, in its unfolding. And of course there is always an unfolding and an enfolding. Now we are moving into an enfolding. And so when an enfolding takes place, and it's not just this beautiful planet, This planet, again, I will use the expression, my father has many mansions, and that was an expression that was given to us by J.C. Because what it really meant was that you are not just one third-dimensional consciousness. You are levels of multidimensionality that is impossible, and even the language he couldn't even bring through, because even then, when he was in a human vehicle, he could only accommodate the language that he had to express himself. Does that make sense in what I'm saying? So, of course, in the expression of Jeshua as well, in some of the writings that were given, they are what we call dead letter words, because it was at that paradigm and it is not applicable now. So we are trying to what we call reinterpret, not so much linearly, but in our feeling consciousness, what this is about. Because Jeshua ben Joseph and the Christ levels, just prior to me coming in, said, basically the Christ said, I want to use your vehicle even more. I want to bring something through. And that was when he explained, or what we call it explained, we may say, the Christ, the understanding of the immaculate concept and the virgin birth, because we have always been the virgin birth. We are the virgin birth by the very fact that we came in as perfection. We are the divine of all that is. We simply came into a perfected creator level, which is the creation, which is the mother, for she is divine. She is beyond the biological. She was the divine Shakti, or the Holy Spirit, or the Shekinah that chose to present herself as a universe of creation for this experience, for itself called creator. So it is a phenomenal. You must understand what pours through me to try and bring it through to you in language that will accommodate your understanding when it's conscious 24 hours a day in my consciousness in multidimensionality and beyond those levels, we will say. Not to look at this as more important. Not this just happens to be the way that the Christ has chosen to present through this manifestation. So what we're saying to you here is that she is in the process of winding down her grids, and her electromagnetic buffers are being taken away because she is moving and she is slowing down, so she is laboring. Now, what's happening is you're feeling the contractions. Because you're in a nature cycle, your very molecular structure, your very DNA structure will feel the rhythm of the mother. You'll feel the matrix. And of course, you have gone into the matrix herself. Now, in going into the matrix, you've got to understand that we have constituted further the addition to the matrix. She wasn't just a nature being. Through our creative thought forming, in choosing for some reason or other, we don't need to know why and what and when and how, that we chose to then what we call cut ourselves off from spirit levels, and in our creative abilities we then outpictured a shadow world that doesn't exist through our thought forming. We created what we call a split ego of ourselves so powerfully that we may say the mother had to accommodate this energy from us, because she is crystalline and she has to reflect back to us. She's an innocent creation on one level. We're innocent on another level. And yet in our creative, there's that fly again. That dear heart always comes and says hello to me, so I'm certain that it will transfigure at some stage or other. Be known as a fly light or a light fly, whatever. I see it at night and it's very bright, but during the daytime it's got a shadow. So what we're saying to you here is that, dear one, please bring this beloved in. If I would be delighted to have this little one here. Bring this energy in. So what we're saying to you here is that you are feeling her quickening now in our thought forming, in forgetting who we were, in going then into, and when we say that, it wasn't just, now let's look at it individually as one person. This is not what it's about. Don't forget, this was also a testing zone for souling. And so we had souls at different stages of consciousness. It's that simple. And so there is no judgment. We have many, what we call, who have come in for this, what we call experience. They have this earth, you see, this planetary being has never experienced the transfiguration that she's going to go through. We know it will take off, but again, don't pull me into linear concepts, because I'm here to present the love consciousness, and I'm only giving you the outer to understand why the inner has been so strong in taking off within you. So the inner core of your being, you are being taken back to the core itself. As I said, I liken it to an apple. There's the seed, And of course the apple is what we've mandated about the apple, about seeing ourselves outside. So there is the apple. Now when we take away the flesh of the apple, we're in the core again. And so, of course, we're back to the core of our being. And I know you'll excuse the pun that I've used here, but we're into the core. Thank you, dear one. I feel this great energy that has walked in here. Thank you, beloved. All is well. And so we're back to the core. Now, in coming into the core of our being, we must let go of what we call the fleshy part of ourselves. Again, listen to the word fleshy part. I'm using that word deliberately. In letting go of the outpicturing of the form consciousness that's been so powerful about our form that we've created death in our hormonal structures, our fear about losing our body because we forgot that we were divine and we thought we were just a human principle, constantly repeating our cycles of birth and death. And so, of course, death has become a very fearful, what we call consciousness, and we have created a consciousness called death, and we have actually exacerbated it even more and created it to such an extent that we created disease as well. When we were in our mental consciousness, we kept feeding our emotions, and all is well, because they are the pendulum swings of the split ego. Ego, the true ego, is I am itself. That is the true ego. So what we're saying to you, beloved, quite naturally, you are feeling the grids of fear. And when I say that, many of you are so conscious. Can you imagine what it's like for souls that are not conscious, or not, when we say conscious, have not been able to push through to their life stream's consciousness? The life stream is how we perceive ourselves as a form. And we've outpictured our forms. We've done it all. And of course, we've even split ourselves off egoically and created every single time, like for instance, this beloved one that has come in is simply a facet of this dear one choosing for him to learn more about himself through the facet. Now when we say this, not in an offensive way, we're saying this with love, but at a certain stage, Creator puts the lid on the reproductive consciousness going on. And that is the reason why, and we're going to bring this one through again, is that some of you have wondered, is there something wrong with me? Because I'm feeling a stirring sexually again, and yet I am very aware that I am in service, and I'm very aware of creator levels within me and my divine love coming through very powerfully. And yet for some reason I feel as if I'm being challenged sexually. And particularly for the male, I will bring this through. The reason for that, bear this in mind, this is important. The mother is in what we call a deep coupling at the moment. She is receiving spirit. And so it will come through us, through our human principle, through our what we call genetic paradigm, through our physical paradigm. And for the male particularly, because he is the transmitter, and the female outpicturing is the receiver, the male wants to procreate again. He's feeling that urge, when in actual fact he's receiving what we call or when I say humankind is receiving the energy of spirit, and the male always gives out and the female always receives in the outpicturing. And so, of course, the male is being tested because he has also been told in our genetic and historical and socio-environmental patterning that it is the male that must always produce. It is the male that must give and produce even materialistically. So, of course, you can understand that particularly at this moment in time, in the collective paradigm, as we will say, in the collective human souling, the earth soul, it is the male that is having the greatest difficulty waking up. You will understand that it is what we call the female that has been setting the pace spiritually, because even the old spiritual consciousness then engendered itself as form, and because the male engendered the form consciousness of spirituality through theology and intellectualism. Does that make sense? The female was what we call ignored and even completely deprived. Now, this must be understood because I'm going to give you a more expanded picture on this. The reason for that, when form consciousness takes off, there must be what we call a firming up of form consciousness, or a matrix known as creation. That then requires the masculine principle to take off very powerfully, where the masculine is outpicturing constantly because the form, the base, must be firmed up. So even in our splitting off through the earth soul, in splitting off as the unicell into the male-female outpicturing from the masculine and feminine oneness, it has, again, as we've engendered through an outpicturing as a male, particularly if we come in as a male, the male's only whole consciousness has been predicated even genetically, environmentally, and socially in firming up the base in the materialistic consciousness so powerfully, and also in the procreative consciousness. Because even though we say, as this Earth Mother is a negative principle, what do we mean by negative? Not emotionally. She is a feminine principle. There are other creations that have male principles in the outpicturing of the, when I say that, masculine, feminine principles. But this is an actual mother principle in the feminine consciousness. But there has to be balances taking off. And so Creator is also testing many things out through its, not just its Adamic principle, but through its matrices in its kingdoms in different ways, through its patterns and through its other consciousness beings that have also engendered what we call a human matrix to experience further. So what we're saying here, for the male it has been very challenging, because particularly now it will be more. Why? Because when spirit wants to come in, then mother must take over. The divine feminine has to take over, because the form consciousness is the masculine for Creator in its outpicturing and unfolding. Now what happens is the unfolding then has to relinquish its old paradigms, which is the masculine principle, for the feminine to start bringing in and fertilizing herself to another level. So she is fertilizing herself through her divine immaculate concept, through you and through Creator levels. And this is how it's taking place, through the trinitization. Whenever there is a recreation, the trinities must come in. It cannot be duality principles, because we've outpictured in the Adam-Eve concept the duality principle, and even not just in the Adam-Eve concept, we've outpictured it in the biological split off, not just in what we call the cell, but we have split ourselves off through the masculine-feminine in the male-female, where we have seen ourselves as opposing polarities, when in actual fact we're the same. We're exactly the same polarity, we just appears to be opposite ends. And so of course there has been what we call in our distorted thought forming a battle of the sexes, and it's been very powerful. Now the female, and yet at the same time Creator knows what it's doing. It's understood the paradigm, and from the hierarchical levels they have been watching this and understood and allowed it to take its flow, because there is a bigger picture than we realize. And so it was not so much the deprivation of the female that was intended. There had to be a strengthening of the masculine consciousness or the form consciousness, the pyramid consciousness, for what we call the capstone consciousness to now start coming in. And it can only ever be done through the re-evocation of the feminine, the divine Shakti, which is the divine Holy Spirit. And that is the reason why Jesuit said, "Behold thy mother, behold thy son," or that was exactly what was meant. The son had to give way to the mother. Even in that simple outpicturing, when I say son, I'm not talking so much gender but how we'd seen ourselves as form, called the sun or the light. We had formed up as the light, but now we are decrystallizing. And so, of course, we're coming into crystal clarity of what this is all about. Does that make any sense to you, dear hearts? So, again, more than anything else, it's for you to understand that we are a masculine and feminine oneness, and it doesn't matter in the outpicturing that you have perceived through the male, through the female. Only see the beloved. Only see the beloved in front of you, because we are the divine. We are the divine unity child waking up and saying, oh, wow. We're in diversity, isn't this? This is the unity child. I've always said about unity is one person who recognizes the beloved in all, everybody within themselves. And this is so important, I say this. Are there any questions that you would like to ask me at all? Yes, beloved. Oh, right, dear heart. What I will say to you, that is simply the form consciousness, again, in what we call its consciousness grids, realizing something's up. Let's put it that way. The capstone is the Holy Spirit. It will only ever be the Holy Spirit. We can say in the form consciousness, because we are linear constructs, we have to give ourselves some what we call codings or some memory grids that will remind us of. That's the reason why we've written a collective script called the End Times. We've even written a collective script called Y2K. And that is to help us let go of how we perceive ourselves in materialistic technology, but not to give, yes, maybe to give ourselves a fright to release some energy. And all is well. And I always say, let's add M2 as well, me too. And so if we can do that, we can have fun. Because what I'm saying here is, that is simply a collective script that we're saying time is out. in even our outpicturing through Y2K. And of course, in the fear consciousness, it will outpicture it even more, and when in actual fact, with all of you, if you don't buy into it, but understand it, and we do have some souls here, very spirit-conscious souls, who are presenting Y2K in what it's about and stabilizing it through their consciousness. Higher levels are taking over that. Yes, dear one. Uh-huh. All right. The reason being, let us look at what we call the left hemisphere and the right hemisphere. Because India and we may say the Middle East and the Eastern world and the West constitute in the outpicturing of the right and the left brain. Now, the left brain is always known as the intellectual concept, where that is the mind concept. And when we say intellectual, it is not to negate the mind. All that has happened is we have intellectualized and split off from the mind of all that is. In choosing to experience from the heart chakra through emotion down, we have devised our own intellectual constructs in what we call the form consciousness and the projection consciousness. So what we're saying here is that India, or that part of the world, the East, we will use it. And again, it is changing. I'm going to say that to you. That's changing because many of the divine, what we call the expanded souls, are here. And India is, in fact, there is a switch around going on. Already the polars, or what we call the poles, are starting to show some interesting concepts in the outpicturing, because many of the young souls or immature souls are coming into India, and many of the advanced souls are coming into the West. And that is the reason why Yogananda was brought over to the West. That is the reason why Maharishi was brought over, and many others came to play their part. It doesn't matter how we perceive it. But what India has constituted is the creative or the passive feminine, that passive spiritual consciousness, whereby it didn't require what we call, yes, we have the gurus and some of the teachers and the masters that are presented in a way, but without control issues through theological dogmas and what we call dead letter consciousness. Does that make sense in what I'm saying to you? Because it was an intellectual construct that took off in the West, even through the outpicturing around Jeshua ben Joseph, or Lord Jesus, and that is fine because at the time we were in that paradigm of consciousness. Even in the Middle East, it was starting to what we call engender that consciousness. In India has been the passive cradle for the love consciousness and what we call the feminine consciousness. Now, and that is the reason why it was much easier to incarnate souls in the East, where they could awaken in higher consciousness without being stopped through some form of heretical consciousness, whereby, as we know, certainly in the Middle Ages and from the 12th century and that, and certainly there has been an horrendous control of what we call masculine or yang consciousness in body consciousness of killing each other in the name of a deity. Because they were not yet ready to awaken. It's the barbarianism of the human consciousness that took off so powerfully. There is no judgment here. And so they could incarnate more expanded souls in the East where they would hold the consciousness. And there are still some great beings that are holding the consciousness, and yet there are great beings here now that are presenting, because yet again, what I will say to you, beloved Sunray, is the active principle of Om is taking off. The active principle is I am. And that is the reason why you are being now told, or when I say encouraged to evoke it, because I am is here. It's always been here. The time or the paradigm of historical consciousness was not yet ready to let go, because in all fairness, when Creator brings in its creation levels, what it does, it sets paradigms of consciousness. So we've only been able to go as far as we could, and that is why some of the yogis went as far as they could. They went into the states of nirvana and into the states of samadhi, for samadhi or ananda means the bliss of beingness, but they thought they had to leave their bodies to get it. In fact, perhaps I can clear something up here, and it may help. Are you still interested in me continuing here? All right, dear heart. My goodness, do I have a captive audience here. But you can walk out any time you like, beloved, any time. You are loved in who you are. But what I want to explain is how what we call the Buddhist and the Shankara consciousness, and we may say the Vedanta consciousness, has been pictured. Let me give it to you very clearly. In the Buddhist And in the Shankara was a great being that came, and a great soul, magnificent soul that came in. But at the time for the consciousness to take place, there had to be a script written through Shankara and through this great being and others, and through the Buddha consciousness, whereby, because mankind was so entrenched in its body consciousness, was so engrossed in its animal levels, that they had to bring through a consciousness and through some form of writings and some form of, we say, sacred Vedanta and things, not Vedanta, but through certain scripts, whereby that for man to accept certain things, they had to talk about illusion. They knew that the souls were trapped in matter, and it was so powerful that in the Eastern concepts, they brought through a consciousness of spirituality, whereby there were souls basically helping those who were ready, this, and putting out that this was in actual fact an illusion. This required some assistance here, because we were so caught up in matter. They then had to be informed, your body vehicle is just an illusionary process. The body vehicle is not an illusionary process. It is a valid form consciousness. Now listen to the difference between it. But at the time, Shankara had to bring this through. He was a great soul, and in the outpicturing had been through his higher manners, what we call coded, to present a different way of looking at things from what we call we may say even the Adam-Eve or Mosaic principle of the Moses law and the Moses consciousness. Now, again, that's the passive and the Western, so, or what we call the Eastern and the West. There is nothing wrong in what is taking place. And so that was through the Buddhists as well. The Buddhists do not accept. They say everything is illusion. The only illusion is not knowing who we are. We are a valid consciousness. Now, Vedanta was something else. Vedanta basically, what we call, try to do it halfway in the Vedantic consciousness. That in actual fact that the illusion was our, what we call, getting caught up with our body consciousness, and that we would still have to go through, but that we had to, there was what we call a balancing with the Vedanta itself. There was like for instance Arjuna, and through the Vedanta, the great Rig Vedas, and the understanding of the great work of Arjuna and Krishna, and that was spirit and form talking to each other. So there was a beautiful outpicturing, because at no stage was spirit denying form. Through the Vedanta, spirit was acknowledging basically the matrix called the Shakti. Spirit was actually acknowledging that form was its consciousness, and that it was its divine self outpictured itself in creation. That's creation. And that is what we call the Vedanta. Now, what we're saying here now, and to get back to, from that little tangential journey there, it all pieces together. Because what's happening now is that no yogic principles are required. And I'm going to share that one with you. It has played its parts, because we had to see through some of the great yogis of that we were beyond what we called an animal nature. That we could produce and we could manifest and we could, Baba produces Vibhuti, but it's not because he's mucking around. His great consciousness is what we call, will outpicture with the child consciousness as a father-mother consciousness to assist. And there have been many great ones, beloved Ramakrishna and so many, and Francis and Jeshua and many dear ones all over in civilizations and throughout what we call hysterical, yes. I think Freud slipped that one in. Hysterical outpicturing, as we would say. What hysteria we've had. We can be hysterical with laughter now. In joy and in understanding that it's been a massive outpicturing of historical perspective in what we call the past, present, and future paradigm. Now, we are saying that in the historical paradigm, the nearest we could get to understanding that there was more than an outside deity where we had to be terrified of the Mosaic, what we call Jehovah, and then in the Western concepts, then what we call put somebody up on a cross and think we had this, what we call worship somebody called Jesus. Yes, the Christ was being acknowledged through this great being, and there is no problem there. I understand the propensity in some of our dear brothers here still wanting to use Jesus as you have to go through Jesus. What they really mean is the Christ, but all is well. It doesn't matter. They will recognize, and perhaps they will not recognize the Christ amongst them yet, but in due course they will awaken up to their own Christ within and understand. And there are many we say this very clearly because there are so many great, what we call, religious concepts coming through now where there is an awakening of the Christ within many dear ones. We have what we call wonderful excommunicated priests that are now waking up to their Christ and all sorts of things. So there is no judgment. There never will be. And of course, old paradigms, old institutions, old organizations don't want to let go because they've been in control for so long. That's the materialistic consciousness, and there is no judgment, yet again. But what we're saying to you is the reason the yogis came in was they showed us that we were more than we thought we were, and yes, we would see them as some form of divinity, when in actual fact we are seeing our divinity through them, not of them, through them. And not recognizing, and of course there's always that propensity in our picturing with most of humanity still to worship something outside of themselves, and we understand that with great love. What we are saying now is that none of that is necessary, and this is where I will bring in this form consciousness. In the form that you are seeing, called Anne Francis, and doesn't matter what you call it, I don't care what you call me. I am. And I enjoy being with you, and I honor and feel blessed in who you are, and even more expanded in your beingness. Thank you, dear ones. I will always convey that very clearly from me in this out-picturing or this form consciousness. But what I am saying is when my awakening took place, I had come from no religious or spiritual concept whatsoever. Not a thing. When the awakening took place, it was what we call a full, what we call awakening to the divine itself. Now, it's not important of how you, there is no ego here. Please understand, there is I am, but there is no what we call split selfish. There is only self, I am, that. All right, this is important because self is I am as well, but not selfish. And so what I'm explaining to you, the reason why it required this soul to undertake this journey was to show that it didn't require historical outpicturing anymore.
End of side 1.
Some of you will be aware that I was less than amused at the time. Because I thought, listen, the small I, the small me, thought that I was at the top of the tree in my, what we call form egoic consciousness, had no interest, never thought about, doubts. It was because of many such as you. It doesn't matter whether it's been through the religions, whether it's been through spiritual disciplines, through spiritual practice, that allowed for this dear one and others to awaken without having to go through all of it. You did the hard work, dear hearts. Thank you, beloved. But it was the historical paradigm at the time, and we all came in and said, well, we'll come in at particular times. But my challenge was the fact that I could see creations, and I was seeing the great ascended host, and they were presenting me from all over the place. And when I said at the time when Francis presented to me, or this beautiful facet of the oversoul called Francis, presented to me and I turned out to be a great ascended being. Now, when I say this, bear in mind, ascended levels are vibrations. They simply, because we're in form consciousness, will manifest themselves as form consciousness. This is important you understand that. They can manifest a form, they can do anything, because once you've transcended what we call the form, or what we call the 3D, 4D levels, then you are in the planes of light, which are unmanifest consciousness states, but have the ability to work with all creations. I'm trying to give it to you as best I can. When I said, but, basically, I'm not into religion, he said, exactly. And I went, but I'm not into spirituality. Exactly. And, of course, that shook me. And I said, and it wasn't the fact that I didn't think I was unworthy. I said flick off to him because he basically was in my face. And I say this because I had no interest in looking, and certainly in my consciousness, in the form consciousness, as the outpicturing called Anne Hughes, there was no choice to look for him. The only thing I can perhaps think of is that perhaps at the time my soul level was clearly speaking to the higher levels, clearly requesting some assistance, but I was completely blank, full stop. I must have been very, where's Tom? Where are you, gorgeous? Tom and I are twins. We were both hard nuts to crack. And I say this, and Tom, I love Tom. Tom is a great soul here. But what I'm saying here is that it was a shock. And basically, all I was required to do, and I say, well, basically, what do you want me to do? Why is this happening? And he simply turned around and said, "Beloved, history is out." I went, "History?" "Yes, dear heart, you have been living in an historical paradigm called past, present, and future." And I go, "Yeah." Now he said, "I will explain something." But not just that. I was fortunate in that he took me into it and melded consciousness with me, where I was able to experience levels of consciousness in order to anchor it into the physical. And I went through certain procedures. Again, not in what we call him talking to me about linear concepts of spirituality, but I experienced spirit in the physical itself, and that was really what took place. And so what we're saying to you, and the reason why this had to present, and we'll get back to Yogananda, is that it was to show that you can walk amongst brother humanity without any, you're in a form, but I am of this world, I'm on this world, but I'm not of it, dear heart. Does that make sense to you? And that's the reason why I joke with you, because there is nothing in me that has any need or has any outpicturing other than that I am the journeyer here, looking at you, knowing who you are, knowing as the Christ itself in this manifestation. Please understand what I am saying here. I am with my brothers of the great realms of consciousness, but I have chosen to step back into this form consciousness, which I did a year and a half ago, for a purpose for Creator to show the normalcy of I am, without requiring any, we may say, titles or forms or labels about spirituality. For I am is not spirituality. Spirituality is historic. Does that make sense in what I'm saying? And that's the seeker-searcher. But when you allow, and many of you now, spirit wants to come in, and we're simply saying, get your form consciousness of how you perceive yourself spiritually or otherwise. It's not for you to dictate the Creator. Creator wants to take you. This is what we're saying here. This is what we're saying. So, and it doesn't matter how you, it's only our mind in our split images that say more or less higher or lower. And Yogananda presented this beautifully for me as well. Because a year and a half ago, a certain incident took place with me, and I won't go into it all, except to say that I left what we call fully my body vehicle, or what we call the consciousness known as my body vehicle. I knew then that death did not exist. Officially, I was not supposed to be here in what we call the form understanding. And there was no heart attack or anything like that. The next minute, I was in the realms of light itself, not astral realms of consciousness. I had completed my, what we call karma drama, as we will say. I had completed this, what we call, this is what some of you are all going through. This is part of what we call resurrectional and ascension processes. I had gone through already in the relinquishment of my family prior, a few years prior, in love, not in denial. I did not leave my family in denial. I left in love because the Father had called me through to what we call Jeshua and Joseph. 3 years before he went through his ascension process, he had resurrected in another consciousness. And that was when 3 years he knew everybody in front of him. And I have to say, I know many of you in front of me. I have to say that to you. Because I know who you are from soul energies, not just from physical outpicturings. And so what we're saying to you is that when that took place, there was then choice for me. I did not need to reincarnate again. It was not necessary. I did not need to come through the birth canal or anything like that. But I chose, in my heart's love, to assist in the consciousness of the Christ that continues to stare me, no matter what. I am still in a form here. I'm back in a form consciousness. But I know that I am beyond form. Does that make sense in what I'm saying? But because we're in this paradigm, and there are many things taking place, the beloved is always in command of my journey. The beloved is I am that through the great ascended Christ, or the office of the Christ, as I will call it. There are many orders working through the office of the Christ. And so I came in through what we call the Melchizedek order to work in a particular way, where I would present not so much, we look at the word teacher, but it's not that. It's the very beingness that you have experienced here. It has nothing to, as you perceive in how you've heard me linearly or constructively speaking to you through my mouth. It's the energy I am working with you. Forget the rest of it. Forget it. Forget it. I am is all there is here. And so it's in acknowledgement of who you already are. And at the time, the reason why I chose to what we call manifest again, and to pick up this form consciousness, because when I was out, I knew all my brothers actually. I knew them all, many of them, who had been incarnated rishis, many. And at the time there was some form of jubilation, I might add, and we were watching this incredible scene in the form consciousness, or the matrix consciousness, as we would say, the physical consciousness. And at the time, I had an opportunity, but to completely finish, and there was no reincarnational process going on again. But I received a beautiful gift, and it was through sweet Yogananda. A beautiful soul, as many of you will feel his energy, and very often Yogananda is sitting here with me, and we talk, and many things go on. But what happened was that I have been told, you're out. And I said, oh my God, I'm out. He said, yes, you are. You're out. And I go, oh my God. I'm saying my God, even in that consciousness. It's just so amazing. I mean, our language doesn't change. It still goes on. Because we can, that's the consciousness it takes off. And I'm still very aware that I'm in the physical. And yet here I am watching myself in the form consciousness on earth, as we call it. And it's just consciousness. That's all it is. And at the time, they said, what do you want to do? And I said, oh my God, you're telling me. And they said, yeah, you can do anything you like. What do you want to do? And I can see JC, as I call him, and a few of the other guys, and the beautiful, when I say guys, I'm talking about masculine and feminine. I'm not talking about male, female. I'm talking about masculine and feminine beings that will even present in the outpicturing on those levels. And in the outpicturing of a male or a female. And that's the divine masculine, feminine androgynes, as we will say. And I knew I was androgynine even before I left. And, I had choices. And then Yogananda, he's very quiet. He sidled up to me. He literally sidled up to me. And he looked at me, and he had these beautiful eyes, and he just looked at me. And I looked at him, and of course immediately there was just that mother energy was so powerful in Yogananda, and that love, that divine love. And he sort of came up to me, and he said to me, and he just looked at me, and he said, hello, beloved. And I said, hello, beloved. And everyone calls each other the beloved. And he said, there's something you can do that I didn't choose to do. And I looked at him and I went, how do you mean? And he said, let me put it this way. And then he talked to me about the fact that his body had been incorruptible for 3 weeks when he chose to leave. Because the reason he chose to leave was because his soul had still thought that the body consciousness was not real, and that death was real, and that he had to leave, and that it was a punishment through even through the Vedanta and the Shankara energies, or the way it had been presented in his, again, everything was fine through his paradigm. He was in surrender to the divine, he was an ascended being, there's no question about that. But what happened was, he said to me, you can do something I never did, because I didn't choose. I chose to leave my body because that was my script, that I thought I was separate from my body and that my body didn't exist. But he said, now I know that the consciousness is real, that it's not so much, it's consciousness, and that you simply transfigure with the consciousness, and that's really what this is about. And so I said, well, what? He said, you can pick it up. And he said, or you can choose to project a manifestation. Well, by then my passport was being looked at, and so it would have got around that I had left. Let's put it that way. Now, if I had projected a form, he said, what will take place if you do such a thing? And I said, and I just looked at him and I went, avatar, avatar, avatar. He said, exactly, dear heart. None of that is necessary. He said, it is historical. And he said, none of it is required. He said, for you, he said, if you do that, then of course the worship will start all over again. And that is the last thing that is, we are out of the historical paradigm. I am is normal. I said, oh my God, this is magnificent. So he said, basic. So I said, I can pick up that pair of old slippers. He said, yes. I said, I feel comfortable with that pair of slippers. I feel so comfortable. And that was what took place. I reunified my body half an hour later, or unified my consciousness, because I saw it as consciousness. I didn't see it. Only, in fact, they were saying to me, only if you think that is a body will you leave, and are you dead. because it's consciousness that decides that that is a body and it's called death. Does that make sense? And so that was the reason why I chose to walk in again and continue normally, but I'm sharing this with you because this is what you guys are going through. That's why I'm saying this. Nobody's more important. No, we are one love here, one being. And that was what we call, what Jesuit and Joseph did 2,000 years ago. He started what we call the new, when I say use the word paradigm, the octave of light. This was the next step, or the transfiguration of the Adamic principle for the next step for Creator in its creations. And so let's help the Mother in our love consciousness to transfigure through us. We are the inner journeyer that is simply presented for Creator, an outer journeyer for Creator to know itself. That's really what this is about, beloved. Thank you for coming. Thank you. Are there any questions, dear heart? Yes, beloved. Well, yes, I basically, it is an explosion when the sun, what we call, dies, in the one sun system, we will say, and I'm giving in very simple, we may say scientific or astrophysical terms. When a sun is in a dying process, it will go through suddenly a very bright energy field where it will increase its energy, and it normally indicates the beginning of the death. Okay. Now, if we apply that, and I'm going to give it to you now from an inner picture, let's pull it into the inner picture. We are going through, and we are brightening up, and we are going through a death in order for the sun to be reborn. Does that make sense in what I'm saying to you? Osiris, Isis and Osiris, isness is coming together, because you see the Divine Mother is isness. It is known as Mother. We will picture it through Mother, the name Mother Mary, through the Shekinah, through the Holy Spirit, through the divine Shakti, Kali. Even we will do many outpicturings in how we perceive what we call the mother principle, or the divine isness. And is picking up as we will say, isness is happening. So we can say astrophysically there are suns being born every day. But what we're doing is in the geomagnetic, geophysic and astrophysic understanding of the creation, we are moving through into some form of, we are moving into null zones. And what it means is when it's a transfiguration of one creation for another state space to take off. And this is what is taking place. And that is the reason why at this moment, as we are moving into we are in the fourth consciousness now. The fourth dimension is the dimension of the mental and the balance. Now, the mental is what we call form consciousness, which gives us what we call our thought forms, and we are experiencing, and I'm not just talking about astral levels, I'm talking about the consciousness of the mental consciousness. We're in the mental planes now, and that's the reason why you feel challenged in your mental processes. You will find them absolutely going berserk at times. Step back, Paul. Keep stepping back and just coming into your trinity, and let the flotsam and jetsam, because all that's happening is you're at the moment speeding up through paradigms at the moment. You're speeding up through what we call huge veils of what we call illusion through our thought forming. These are the veils of illusion, as we say, which have been based in frequency modulators known as what we call time frequency. And because we have, it's like there's wrinkles in our muon wave fields. There are many things taking place in astrophysical terms. And so it appears to be distorted, but in actual fact it's been a choice to experience in frequency zones. And that's the reason why we will be challenged in our thought forms and everything like that. Yes, beloved? Yes. Grids, and it depends on what grid you're on, and that's why you're picking up some of your multidimensionality, because, as you heard me say, it's not just this planetary being. She's the physical matrix for the universe. That's what's happening. And so the universe is trying to line up now, because all the corridors are being opened. The creator levels is, and we may say the nearest that we know about the creator levels are, we will say, the central sun, or what we call the Orion or the Pleiadian. Now the Orion energy is what we call, is where the architectural consciousness for creator, we have creator levels or created gods that go on and on and on and on and on. It's impossible to explain. But what happens is that it presents a cradle of creation, and the cradle of creation, we're directed through the Pleiadian concept for what we call the cradle, which is what we call the blueprints that are received through the Elohim brotherhoods, the Elohim creators. And that is, what we call in the beginning was the word. So when the harmonic takes off, when created sends off a new harmonic, that's the reason why everybody's being asked to get their act together, because the whole of this universe is going through. When Jeshua ben Joseph and Francis presented to this form consciousness, this soul, prior to me, what we call choosing to pick up this physical vehicle again, I was asked, that was when I was asked to relinquish my paradigm of biological concepts about family, when I was asked to let go, because by then I was also in a transcendence where there was no desire outside of myself, not in denial of the sweet brothers through whom I'd incarnated, and my beloved ex-husband and people like that, and my son. He was only 17 when I was asked to relinquish all of this, because at the time I understood that the Father was calling me. And the Father is the higher overself that wanted, from its monadic levels, to instruct its facet, that it wanted to wrap up its monad. And that was really what was taking place through the overself. And at the time when Jeshua ben Joseph and Francis presented to me, in the out picture where they presented to me, 2 o'clock in the morning, and this was quite a few, 1992, 93 sometime, what happened was that when I said, they said, you have 24 hours, there is a door presenting to you. And I went, and you have 24 hours to walk out with one change of clothes and just your passport. Now, I had a passport, so I didn't have to go looking for one, but I had one. And everything is to be given with love and acknowledgement to your family, everything. You are to take nothing. You are simply, and at the time when I said, well, what does this mean? And they looked at me, and I've never forgotten, they just shrugged their shoulders and said, beats us. And I went, and I looked at them, and I said, I beg your pardon. They said, we're telling you, we received a direction. Even we don't know what it's about. And I went, oh my God, and that was it. That was 24 hours I had for that to take place. And that's why Yogananda said to me, you can do something we never did, because they're showing us that we're going past the paradigms of even the ascended realms, because at the time when the souls, on certain souls who'd incarnated into physical realms or creations, they'd only been able to work with the paradigm that they were able to work with. And they reached the top of that paradigm through the wonderful yogis. And many, not just in the East, there were many in the West, but because of the passivity of these, we have felt more comfortable because of some of the horrendous behavior in what we call the nature levels in the West, that we have, in our active principles, become a little too enthusiastic in converting ourselves. Do you see what I'm saying? Rather than transforming, let's put it that way, or transfiguring, but I won't say much more. Yes. Yes, he worked in actual fact that he was, you see, this is what I'm saying, many expanded souls came in, not to present as Christ, but to present as expanded souls, whereby they would learn more about what we call through civilization, through what we call the understanding of science, through the creative levels very powerfully, where they would show a phenomenal expansion. Here's another creator coming in. Through expanded levels of whereby they would show a greater propensity with certain gifts, because they are creators' levels. They are the outpicturing of creation through the soul levels. That's how creator knows itself, through learning about itself, through its music, through the art, literature, science, many ways that we will look at it, sculpting, through the more creative, passive levels of ourselves, And yes, he was guided. That's why he received, and also he had an outpicturing through his wife, who knew that and had a premonition that he was going to be killed. And on the 13th of March, this is all coming in here, was warned that beware the Ides of March. In actual fact, she had a premonition in her psychicism, as we may say, because we all have psychism levels. It's to go beyond those levels of the divine levels. They are just merely the beginning of the kindergarten levels of our multidimensionality, that's all. All right, they are. And so, of course, there have been many souls that have incarnated in civilizations that have shown great gifts, and what we call where people have looked to them as leaders. Many, Martin Luther came through heart levels, and there are many, many ways. And so, of course, what we're doing now is that we are presenting through our heart energy the pure love we are. This is the glue that holds the universe together, and that the universe says, hey, you know, I'm pulling all my fragments together now. I want a new universe. Creator, us, through our divine higher beingness, is saying, hey, I want to recreate myself, and I want to pick up my mum. Mom. Yes, beloved. Mm-hmm. Yes, dear. Yes, dear one. You see, in the, we may say in the out-picturing, and now the reason I use this word out-picturing, I do it deliberately, because I'm aware I'm the beloved here, and I am what we call an inner journeyer, simply presenting in a form matrix. Alright, so that's the reason I use the out-picturing, because this is consciousness, but it presents as form. This is consciousness. One little piggy went to market, and it presents as form. And so what we're saying here is that in the out-picturing, in the solar consciousness, as we will say, the moon and the sun are very, very germane to each other. I love that word germane. I swear I did this deliberately. But they are very, what we call, they are an axis to each other. They are an adjunct to each other. And in actual fact, the moon was presented deliberately. Again, let me just give this one to you. The moon was presented to us because when we, what we call, fell asleep and went into what we call a bit of a dizzy spell, or we may say that we what we call went into a dream spell and got trapped in time, what we had to do was the higher levels had to then present something to us, because our form consciousness was so powerful that they could not get the soul's attention. So they had to then devise in creation, believe it or not, what we call as some assistance. And the moon came in. Because it works in what we call emotional levels in some respects, but also the sun was so bright, the sun is active principle that's so powerful, the moon then would what we call lull us into sleep, as we will say. Yes, we would experience the tidal consciousness, because that's the nature part of her beingness as well, through the tides and through the emotions. But what I'm saying is it was the only way that they could, what we call, because the souls couldn't get awake, they would put the form consciousness to sleep, literally, so the souls could get their instructions. And that's the reason why some of you even now feel as if you've been wading through huge, you say, my God, what's been going on? I feel as if I'm so tired. And I said, because they've been making up for the daylight consciousness that is rabbiting on like crazy through what we call the mental programs, and this is to be understood. And so they had to bring in the moon. Now, what I'm saying to you here, Nana, is that the moon and the sun are, again, important for this solar consciousness, for this human, when we say this nature being. The sun will always affect the moon and her emotions, because it is directed through the central sun. It is an out-picturing of the central sun in the solar consciousness. All right? And so what happens is that the moon works with us from an emotional level through her past, present, future paradigm, as we say, from the mother, or the matrix known as the mother, the creation level. And we're saying to you that the sun, in actual fact, always what we call gives energy to the moon in order to keep that energy going for us in our emotional levels, to experience ourselves through out-picturing. In the two alignments that are taking place at the moment, the moon had to go through a solar eclipse, which I believe was something like in time factor the 28th or something like that. Well, July rather, what was taking place was the release of further emotional levels. The release of major energy fields, the release of the emotional levels in her paradigm or her matrix of her fields of consciousness through her elemental kingdoms, her plant kingdoms, her mineral kingdoms. They were all being released and given further assistance. The sun is coming in at this moment because it is the sun consciousness, and this is the reason why we have a major solar eclipse taking place. because the sun's strength is even greater than it's ever been at this moment, because it is being directed by the central sun at this moment in time. So the sun is receiving massive energy from the central sun. Normally the central sun leaves what we call the solar paradigm alone until it's ready to start picking up its solar paradigm for its universal paradigm, or universal pushing through. And so what the sun is going to do is going to activate us even more. It's that simple. And the sun, and it's a beautiful, what we call, because we're like children in the kindergarten, they've got our attention. So everybody is pinging in to the sun on the 11th of August. And I'm going to share something with you as well, because, again, what I would like to do is yet again acknowledge everybody who's playing their part through what we call spiritual outpicturing, through meditation groups, through what we call light centers, through, even though I'm very tough, because I know that I'm here to help people not get stuck in just one, saying I'm a light center and I'm a healer and I'm a teacher and that, you're everything. And so I will push you through and will not even buy into the outpicturing of how you perceive yourself spiritually or religiously or anything like that, or ideologically. It is because I honor who I know you really are. And you're simply outpicturing, so I'll push you through to stop you getting stuck in a groove, as we will say. Because I am is all that is. But what I'm saying to you here is that there is a buzz of energy going around that many who have to go through the understanding of forgiveness. Now, until you wake up, even when you're waking up, because of the outpicturing and the drama that has taken place on earthly planet, through the splitting of the ego, through the us and the them, and through what we call the barbarism of our consciousness that has killed each other and wounded each other and abused each other, when it's our outpicturing of what we are bringing to it's our karma drama, as we will call it. There is a choice now for many that we are aware that they can choose this opportunity to link in and go through a forgiveness. And I'm just simply saying this because this is a choice. Some bright sparks have picked up on this, and I'm saying go for it, dear hearts. Because in forgiving of how we perceived ourselves more than anything else in relationship, because I'm not about forgiving anybody else, I think it's about forgiving yourself more than anything else, because we only attract what we are presenting from within. And so I will just simply convey that. So basically, it is phenomenal energy coming through from the central sun through the solar eclipse and the lunar eclipse. All right, dear heart? That's what's happening. We may say there are so many energy fields coming, and the outpouring of grace and the outpouring of, we may say, the central sun energies through, we understand it, we will call it the Christ or the Buddhic Krishnic energy fields, the effulgence, the Brahma, and all the energies that are coming in. It doesn't matter what we call it. Words, as I always say. And it's the pure beingness that is now waking up in its paradigm. Yes, dear one. Is anyone? Yes, dear one. Mm-hmm. All right, dear heart. All right, beloved. What the potential was is, yet again, the experiencing was your higher self reminding you, you are home. Home is where the heart is. So we may say that it, in an outpicturing through a physical, linear construct, you went to what you perceive as your home, and you felt comfortable sufficiently to go to sleep. Do you see what I'm saying here? I'm saying it, I'm giving it to you in a very simplistic way, perhaps, but it was basically, they took you out. Had you been able to sleep in the other place that you were in, or were you finding that you could? All right, beloved. It doesn't matter. That, dear one, presented an outpicturing for you to come home to who you really are. It doesn't matter how it presented. Again, it's so important that we realize and do not get caught up with how something may present outside of ourselves that we can either choose to dualize and say right or wrong and why have they done this to me, when if we look at it we can say, hey, hang on a minute, this is basically where we don't need to be anymore and all is well. Do you see what I'm saying? It's a discernment rather than a judgment that comes through. And when your higher self wants your attention, because we are so dualized even now, and we're still working with some very dense energy still on this planet, most of humanity is still not awake, and that's fine. But, in that process, we can turn around and say, hey, Everything's fine, because I'll only reflect something that I need to look at and let go of with love, and it won't repeat itself to you again. All right, dear heart? So basically, you were being asked to come home, as we will say, in your beingness, and they were able to take you out and probably experience your multidimensionality in letting go of your form consciousness. Yes. And it's not important, dear heart. This is one thing I will say to you. Don't get caught up with what we call, as you've heard me say, who cares whether you can see an aura? Who cares? You know what I'm saying. Literally, honestly and truly. Don't get caught up with the lower psychism. That's kindergarten stuff. Yes, when we open up, we will have those abilities that some people are more psychic than others. But again, it's spiritualism, listen to the word, not in no negation, because they have to start somewhere. They have to have halfway houses through metaphysics and all sorts of things to get us away from our intransigent consciousness. So we're saying now, let go of the halfway houses. We're here, and we don't have to be halfway. We're no longer meta-function. We're full metatronic function, dear heart. Let's get it going. We are it happening now. We're the inner and the outer. Yes, beloved. Yes, beloved. It's quite simple. You just said it, dear heart. It's simply the mind not happy with what it is, because the mind is distorted. That's all. That's all, because it's the mind that dictates to the form. Don't forget, the mind of creator is all that is. You have been brought in with creative fear, so you have used your mind. And in our, we may say, animal consciousness, we've recreated through our mind out picturings of our form matrix. All right, dear heart? And of course, when we're frightened and when we are not happy, we create dis-ease. And of course, we are not at ease with ourselves because we are thinking in a distorted way. Do you see what I'm saying? All right, beloved. Yes, dear one. How I am going to answer that is with what we call increased levity here. No, I think we are at the moment the most schizophrenic planet at this moment in time. Not everybody is schizophrenic on this planet, and there are billions at the moment, or thousands and millions waking up with psychotic experience is normally based on some form of fear. And psychosis takes off, or neurosis. Now, multidimensional experiences is when you feel fine about who you are. Now, the psychosis will come in because, listen to psyche. Psyche goes into a panic. Don't forget, psyche has gone into the underworld, and we've been in the underworld, we may say. And so what happens is when the multidimensionality starts to, what we call, express itself to psyche, psyche feels very fragmented, and so of course feels, is there something wrong here? When in actual fact your love, your eros consciousness is taking off, your multidimensionality. Does that make sense? Eros is love. And eros and psyche are one and the same. All that happened was that eros split itself off in psyche, and psyche is spirit that went in and presented itself as matter. That's the mother. All right, dear heart. Well, beloved, I feel that you've probably had sufficient from me, dear one. I am certain that, again. Yes, dear heart. Yes, beloved. Yes, beloved. All right, beloved, let me explain this to you. Do you remember I said you don't so much buy out with the outpicturing of what we call what I'm perceiving here? I am working specifically with you to fine-tune you on those levels. That's what this is about. It's not about, again, you see, one of the things that I've always said, and this is my joy, the fact that, yes, I will give you an outpicturing in your, what we call your vortexes or your chakra energy fields. But, you know, in the beginning when people would come to me and they say that they were on the 16th level of initiation and the 17th chakra, and this, I say, dear heart, if you can move through the first 3 chakras, we're going well. So what I'm saying to you, when I said I am, forget the form that you are looking at, dear heart. I am working with those energy fields to assist you to anchor in those even more expanded levels and bully for you if you're experiencing those levels. You probably will find that you also have to fine-tune some other levels further down the track. All right, dear one? All right, dear heart? Mm-hmm. Oh, I see, beloved. Yes. All right, don't worry about it. Don't, again, this is, lop the head off, master. Let it go worrying about it, because what this is, it's not a breakdown. Your higher levels are probably holding back for now because they're doing something else with you. So don't let your mind come in and want to dictate to your divine overself and through what we call your macrocosmic grids that are downloading informational energy fields through you at this moment. Don't worry about it, Master, okay? The potential is that they are what we call, maybe at this moment, they don't want to connect with you just at that moment. Do you see what I'm saying to you? They are holding back and it's always a higher purpose, Master. Remember that. The divine I am knows exactly what it's doing. It's not stupid. So let go from the microcosmic level of, no, when I say that, let go from the microcosmic level of thinking there's something wrong and I can't break through. Let it go, Master. This is so important. All right, beloved? You're fine. Wonderful, beloved. Well, we've been having a dance here, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it with you, dear. Thank you. Thank you. You will be aware, and again I know, and I will always say this, I am through this form a very strong energy field, and many of you will probably have been feeling it. But it is love that is speaking to you. And what is love? Other than the four-letter word. And, you know, some of us have called it supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, but none of that is necessary anymore. Let's simplify who we really are. Love is simple. Let's keep it simple, sweethearts. This is what I'm saying. Now, yes, in working with you, I have kept you occupied through the gift of what we call constructs or language or seed syllables to assist. Even the language I have used has been working with you as well through what we call these form consciousness beings. They are actual beings of consciousness. So what I'm saying to you here